Okay, so I want to do a quick overview of the universal syringe dispenser. Basically, you can use any type of syringe for this application, and what it does is kind of automate the syringe for you. What we do is we use a lot of our matrix bottle filler parts. So we use like our nozzle holders here, and what we do is we drill out these plates to the diameter of whatever syringe you're using. And then we just use collars to lock it in place. And then on top of that, we have the stop here. And basically, if your syringe doesn't have a spring on it, we then put a lock up here so that way it can also have pull-up action and down. As far as positioning the syringe to where you want it, this is just the R&D unit, but normally there's a little jog knob up here, and you can basically turn this up and down, and that basically puts the syringe to whatever height you want it at. Basically, it's a super simple frame that is pretty robust. We use it on a lot of our stationary bottle fillers. Basically, they're super light, mobile. You can put them wherever you want. Basically, you would... there's normally blocks on each of these edges, and in the back you could screw it down to a table if you want to put it somewhere permanently. Also, along with it, we do sell these with a cabinet, minus this pump. This pump's for a matrix filler, but we're using this cabinet to R&D this in a little bit. Basically, what it consists of is industrial controls. Basically, we don't just put everything on a little circuit board and call it good. Everything has its own components, so like the stepper drives are in there. So like if a stepper drive did go out, you can replace that component versus a whole circuit board or sending a whole machine back to replace a little piece on there. Everything is built industrial. You will have a key switch, an indicator light, and an e-stop all on the top there. It is just 110 power. This is the stepper version. There is a pneumatic version too, but I think most people are going to appreciate the stepper version. That way you can fine-tune the volume you want to push without actually using the stops on the syringes. So that's kind of an overview of that unit and the cabinet. Let's go ahead and look at the user interface here. So these screens also come with it with a keyboard and a little mouse. The user interface is basically based off of our matrix bottle filler systems. Basically, you have a fill count. So anytime you hit your foot pedal, this one will fill 2 bottles and then stop. You also have a delay between the fills, so that way you can get to the next bottle before it refills again. An example of this would be if I hit start cycle now. You'll see it's going to run the function 2 times. And then if I hit a foot pedal or hit cycle start again, it's going to do the same, repeat 2 times. So you could do that. You could have an unlimited amount of fill counts. So if you have like 100 containers out here, you could say 100 and fill 100 with a 2-second delay. Or the other option you can do is put that fill count to 1. Basically hit cycle start on the screen or hit your foot pedal. And that'll just run 1 cycle at a time. So each time you want to run it, you could just hit your foot pedal. Fill volume is how much you want to actually fill. So basically right now we have it set for 0.5. So if I go down to this guy here and click cycle start, he's going to fill 0.5 mLs. Now because this is a universal syringe dispenser, there is also a scaling option. So down here, if you have a syringe that's more than 2 mLs or a bigger body, basically you would need to recalibrate it. And we got a video on that, but there is a calibration button here that makes it super easy. Basically what you would do is turn off all the power, mark this so you would turn it by hand, 1 rotation, and see how far down it goes on your syringe. Tell that in that calibration screen, and then you're set. Then all your distance numbers become whatever the syringe is. So it's super easy to use. We also have fill speed in here. Fill speed is basically how fast that plunger is going to go down. So again, that's going to be that speed there. Right now it's at 100. You know, if I put this to 10, you're going to see it's going to go real slow. So basically that's what that does. End fill delay here. Basically what that's going to do is when I hit start cycle here, basically at the bottom here, it's going to stop for a second before it plunges back up. Let me show you again. If I hit cycle start, it stops there for a second. Now, say I put that to 0. What that's going to do is basically plunge down and plunge up real quick. I kind of like a little delay there just because of any back pressure in your syringe or any drip. Depending on what type of syringe you're using, that's a great tool to have. I'm going to put that back to a second. Next we have the delay between fills. We've already kind of went over that. And finally is travel feed rate. This kind of matches with fill speed, but we wanted to break it up a little bit. But what that does is basically if I put it to like 200, you'll see it's going to feed still slow down, but it's going to go real fast up. That's basically travel feed rates, how fast it cruises up. And that also is going to pertain to some other things like when it comes down to its positioning in different things like that. And we'll get into that here in just a second. Next is a purge option. What this is when you're first setting up, you might want to just run the syringe up and down a few times. In here, you could basically set a feed rate using just this and this distance. So I have a feed rate of 100, a distance of 0.5, and I could hit purge. And what that does is basically runs just a quick cycle using those two variables. So that way you can kind of purge the line, make sure everything's good to go, everything's working correctly. Next is Z plus and Z minus. What these two buttons do right here is basically use these values here again, and they basically run the whole Z axis. So basically if you reset and home your machine, it's going to hit a limit switch, and then you could either drop it down to where you want it to start, or you could set a new start location. And what I mean by that is probably the hardest part of the whole thing. After it's set up and hits its home location, you need to tell it where the top of your plunger is. And to do that, basically, you would go to your feed rate, type in whatever you want, and a distance. I'm just going to put that to 1 and hit the Z minus button. Basically go down to till I got a little plunge. And now what I'm going to do is basically put it to 0.1 here and plunge it a little bit further. And you can see it moving, and what I'm going to do is kind of line it up with that 0.5 ml line there. And you could make those, increments a little smaller, so I could even go like 0.01 and keep going down here. Get it right where I want to start, and then I could just configure the start location. So I could hit start location 1, hit set. And then down here, this green button, that basically saves with any program. So basically, if you're using two different types of syringes, you could have configure start location 1 before a syringe by BD, and then start location 2 be a syringe by Cart Farm, something like that. So it's kind of a cool option to have. And then all these variables you could save. So I could hit save as G code, hit replace that one, and then when I start up in the morning, I could just reload those variables. So it's pretty slick little system. You can also, if you're running a bunch of cycles here and something's going crazy, you can also just hit this pause button, and it's going to basically pause the machine where it stands. You could unpause it, stuff like that. You also have a little fill count here. So basically, if you do have a fill count greater than a minute, basically, it'll tell you how many bottles or fills you're doing per hour. It'll also tell you how much you have done. So we've done 24. You can also add in some QC stuff and export this as basically a CSV file if you want to keep records of what you're doing. There's also a number of cycles up here. Each time we do run a cycle, it keeps track of that, and you can clear that counter like every hour if you want to keep track of something. But that's basically how the user interface works. Basically, this is the frame here, and that's the cabinet. Eventually, we will be adapting this probably to our matrix filler, but for right now, we're just going to keep it stationary and go from there. If you have any questions on this or want even more information, please go to www.rockymountainplc.com. We'd be more than happy to help you out. But that's kind of the overview. That's the machine. Yeah, any questions, let us know. Thanks, guys.